Okay, well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the third episode in the Landscape, Place, and Participatory Media Research Seminars. So today, I am reluctant to say that we are hosting Dylan because we're virtual and you're one of us. But we're delighted to welcome Dylan Royce, who, as you know, is a senior lecturer in media here at Lincoln School of Film and Media. He's not only a teacher, but his early career was spent at the BBC as a journalist, a producer, presenter, among other things. He has 30 years of experience of working in media, journalism, radio presenting, and more, as well as holding a BA in broadcast journalism and an MA in community radio. And some of that, I think, is what Dylan's going to talk to us about today. He is also, however, as his students well know, a dedicated teacher with a PGCE in early years education from the University of Leicester, which he seemingly took while seconded from the BBC to work in primary education. And that also seems to feed into some of the work today when his work with 3 to 5-year-olds, seeing how education needed to be experience-led and fun. Finally, those two interests and passions and experience inform his research today. So his main research interests are in radio, but he's been increasingly moving into community media projects with interests away from the mainstream broadcasting, which bring his interest in teaching with his media career closer together. And so today, Dylan is going to talk to us about a title I should confess I completely invented and forced upon Dylan, which was Can Participatory Media Make Communities Stronger? But clearly the title that he's presenting to us today is The Impact of Media Outreach Interventions. So thank you, Dylan.
Thank you very much. I chose to ignore the title given to me and go with what I was actually going to talk about, which, as it says on the screen, the impact of media outreach intervention. So thank you everybody for coming along today, and those who went to Tom's presentation a week or so ago about Southern Sudan will note some levels of commonality, I think, between my presentation and his. Not about the location of the research or the topic, and certainly not the design of the PowerPoint that you can see in front of you, but the actual ethos, the use of media outreach projects as a force for good. And a force for good, yes, I do recognise that that's a value judgment in there, and it's probably presentation littered with such sort of like things today. But I'm sure we can get over that. And firstly, though, I have to be honest, and that is a very early phase of the formal research that's underway at the moment. But in a way, it's been going on for quite a number of years, with a huge amount of data collected in my mind as memories of student conversations and written reflections about impact and the impact that they have benefited from about the project that we're going to be talking about. What I want to do in the next phase of this is to formalize that collection and make an analysis of impact based on something which I think is probably more academically solid, as well as based on what I think is inherently true. At the end of the presentation, I'll be only too pleased to try and answer some questions that you might have. How successful I'll be in that is debatable, but more importantly, from my perspective, I think I'd welcome those comments and any suggestions for reading and ways of carrying out what is going to be quite an extensive and difficult analysis process. Okay, so here we go then, the impact of participating in community media interventions on the production team. So what are we talking about when we think of media and art interventions? Well, typically, some ones that I'm aware of, we're talking about like subway paintings in Gainsborough, community drama productions. Thinking of the likes of Priscilla Bigadike, which was broadcast on the BBC. You might be aware of Mobile Arts for Peace, which is a Nanda Breen's project collaborating with many people to forge community links in Rwanda. And then there was Tom's photography project in Southern Sudan, which was spoken about in another research seminar. And all of these projects have got identifiable impacts on those communities. Now, most of the analysis of media and arts interventions is about the impact on the community itself, and that's absolutely fine because that's typically where the funding is aimed at. It's part of the remit, but what's less well researched is the impact on the people who carry out those interventions, the arts workers, the professionals, Or in the case of what we're going to be looking at, university students who are going into the community carrying out the interventions. We're going to call them, I think, probably call them mentors. And there's a really good reason for that, because it does get very confusing when you are talking about all these different stakeholders. You've got teachers and students in a project where university students then go into a project and become the teachers. It all gets very confusing in the write-up, so we're trying to identify them by specific terms. So I might try anyway to refer always to the students in this, the University of Lincoln students who are going into this intervention as kind of mentors. So we have an intervention where there are lots of benefits to the client, and the client in this case is the children, and they're going to be researched by a separate team at the university who contacted me to see if I'd be interested in collaborating with them to gauge that side of the project's impact. But what I want to see is the ways in which the mentors, who are in effect the students on this module, are impacted by that experience as well. There are learning outcomes naturally, but what this is going to look at are those other non-credit benefits to the project. Now, without wanting to jump to the conclusion slide of this presentation, that impact can be both positive, and I'm hoping mostly positive in a range of ways, but also there are some negative impacts if a project doesn't fulfill its desires to those carrying out the intervention, and I'll come on to those as we progress through. So a little bit of history about how this project works and how it's developed. It's had a number of different manifestations, but it's always been a semester B module at level 6, the old level 3, year 3, so level 6 as we call it now. So it's just about the last thing students do before they finish their undergraduate studies. It started off as something called the School's Radio Project, was where a small group of students all followed the radio pathway of media production. And what there is a strong sort of common thread of DNA that goes from that original project right through to the ethos of what we see now. Now, students at the time, they were partnered with a school, and they went to that school, they taught radio skills. And then those children came to university to broadcast their show on a restricted service license, which was set up each year for that project. The restricted service license had a name. It was called Siren Radio. And that's the root of the radio station that we now see at the University of Lincoln, which is a full-time radio station. The issue was that this was quite a restricted module. It was an option, and it was decided to broaden this out to something called community education, which saw other types of media encouraged. And what we have now is another new module called Community Impact, and it's the first year that's run, and it's a core module for MED, media production students, and SMP, sound and music production students. So we've got a lot more people involved. That does have its challenges, but it does mean we've got a very much bigger sample size and a lot more analysis to do, which is good, really, because it gives us a broader spectrum of impacts. Now, one of the questions that always comes up when talking about these kind of projects and impact is why media, why radio, why any of that sort of stuff? Why not some other kind of academic study? Well, really, there are a number of factors which I've looked at, researched. And indeed, we do see other types of academic study, archaeological projects, community history, and those sorts of things. But the thing is about the way in which a community can be engaged through media and people excited by a project in a way that they understand is quite important. Community media has the ability to bring people together doing a range of jobs that they recognise. Media projects in this sense are quite collaborative, and lots of different people doing lots of different jobs. People get the chance to communicate and make friends with people that they perhaps know just by sight, but they now get to talk to them. They get to support each other. Community media projects broadly aren't so much to do with the artifact, but to do with collaboration and community building. And that's exactly true of the mentor group as it is to do with the group that they are bringing effect upon. They get the experience as well. The children in this sense get the experience of exciting equipment, and that might seem to be sort of quite a fickle thing. But children really do enjoy that, and they really do engage and want to do that for a number of reasons. They also may not know how to do the jobs, but those jobs within a media product is practical, and there is a common level of cultural understanding. The job titles are familiar to them. They want to be a presenter, they want to operate a camera, they do lighting, write scripts. All of these things are understandable to them. And it's also something that is different if you're going into school. So that level of change is also something which children do look forward to. It's an exciting, different project. Now, looking at the research which is being done, we need to think about the different people that are taking part in the project, the stakeholders. They'll all have aims and objectives, and these cross over into the project. Some of those will be shared, some of those will not. Now, one of the stakeholders in this is the university. So what's the university getting out of this, which is quite a resource-heavy module, to be fair, compared to some? Well, they get enhanced reputation working with professional bodies outside of the university. There's the impetus for community impact, and there's also research partnerships which are being developed outside of the organisation. Then you have the students or mentors. Well, they clearly have an aim and objective to pass the module, but there are other benefits to the module. I'll come on to those. That's I suppose the main focus. We'll talk about that in a while. And lastly, there are the clients. Now, I'm going to split the client into two here. There's the client representative, and the client representative is the teacher, and the teacher may have a curriculum area that they particularly want to cover. So they've got this little tick box that they need to be talking about this thing, getting the children to understand. Or there might be an Ofsted weakness within the school that they want to address through the project. But then they have the children. Now, the children have got their own aims and objectives in this that are completely separate from the ones that the teacher may have. They want to have a good time. They want to learn how to do this. They want to go on the radio, operate a camera, get their hands on the equipment, find out about Ariana Grande. I'll talk more about Ariana Grande later on. And that's actually really quite an important factor. The fact that the teacher might want to do one thing, but the kids just want to have fun. And it's building that into the whole project. So sometimes this is quite a difficult balance to achieve between all those different stakeholders. So what do we have then? What happens? Well, we've got a group of 4 mentors, and they're placed with a client, and that is mostly based on the mentor's hard work. I pull myself back, or the staff team pull themselves back from that day-to-day organisation. The mentors are responsible for researching the client, contacting the client, negotiating with them, and then forming and running a series of workshops with that client. Now, the clients that we work with can be in any community group in the broadest sense, but schools and young people seem to be the ones that are most receptive at the moment. We have 9 altogether this year. We've got the Trinity Arts Award, Lincoln Castle Academy, Saxelby Primary School, Reefham Primary School, Burton Haffo Prep School, Allington Primary School, Metheringham Primary School, we've got the Pilgrim School, and the Lincolnshire Travellers Initiative. So we've got a range of locations, rural, urban, a range of ages, and also a ranges of level of affluence within there. In the past, we've also had groups working with scouts, going on camp with the like. Now, the client will be given skills to produce a media artifact. The mentors will write a report on the client and their experience, and they'll also write a personal analysis, and this is one of the ways in which impact is measured. From the mentor's point of view, they have a huge level of responsibility in how this project is negotiated and run. It's run over 12 weeks. That's the length of the intervention. And at the moment, we've got about 80 reflections per year that we're anticipating coming in. So the core question that we're going to be wanting to answer is how these 80 students have been impacted by that experience. And there are other sub-questions that go with that as well, and that is whether or not the nature of the client makes any difference to that experience. A group which has been placed with Burton Hathoe Prep School, do they have a similar or different experience to ones that have been placed with the traveller groups, for example? Certainly questions that at the moment I don't have answers to, and that's something I'm going to be looking at. So the methodology is still under examination, I think, still kind of working through that, but broadly what I can say is that it's almost definitely action-based research, where neither I nor the mentors are just observing, but are in part looking to bring about change itself within the project. If we consider, I suppose, the original sort of idea of action research by Letwin, where there's recognition that there's a planning stage, an intervention stage, and an evaluation stage, that would seem to fit fairly well. Although Wellington's later work would suggest that there's a level of reflection on the methodology and the intervention that needs to take place. And that's why that we're going to run the project over not just 1 year, but we're going to look at 3 years where we're honing and developing that project and analysis. You might say, why not more? Well, that's fairly clear from what Wellington writes, in the projects like this may never actually finish, and that's problematic for publication. So at some point you're going to have to call an end to it. And secondly, the principal way in which the data is going to be collected through reflective essays means that there's going to have to be some level of coding which needs to take place to correctly identify trends within those essays. And that's where a link comes in with a project I'm collaborating with at university and broader called the Narupi project, which offers a platform for analysis of impact data. One of the partners within the Narupi project is the University of Lincoln, so we've got access to that as an analytical tool as well. Now, the grouping of responses needs to be looked at, and so far I'm going to, in this presentation anyway, identify some specific examples of impact, but because they need grouping, we need categories to group those under. So Anderson looks at 10 areas in that particular, or Anderson's particular view of grouping categories, things such as context and perspectives and strategies. So strategies may well be a mentor being able to put in place organisation and management processes, and context, perhaps transferring skills to other areas. One suggestion that I've already had to develop this is that the responses maybe should be benchmarked in some way with a questionnaire at the start about mentors' perceptions before they even start the project. I've had a think about this. I'm unsure, to be fair. I don't want to pollute the mentors' narratives with my own ideas, and I would welcome your thoughts about that at the end of the presentation. Is that something that I should be heading towards, or something that I should be steering clear of? As in all of these areas, and anybody that's done any kind of study and research, you sort of end up reading and developing your ideas, and there's a range of areas that you start thinking, actually there's a side area, but it takes on a level of more importance as you read it. The stakeholders, for example, are part of a collaborative community, and there's a level of commonality. But that doesn't mean that all of these mentors, sorry, not all, all of the mentors, but all of the participants in the project are the same. Klein, for example, points out that children have a range of social identities and that they belong to different communities as well. And likewise, everybody in that collaborative community around the project is going to have their own views and their own sub-communities. A community in that sense is not a ring-fenced group of clones, but a more of a sort of a Venn diagram, I suppose, of crossing over different interests and beliefs. Nothing is more evident than the realization amongst the mentors that simply viewing their client as gypsies or travelers or Romanies is wildly simplistic. And what we have there is one of the other hidden benefits from a project like this, of the opening up to the mentors of different cultural recognition, that children from an affluent Lincolnshire school may want to make a programme about Ariana Grande again, and also a group of gypsy children from Grantham are likewise motivated with that common interest. So through media, bonds are forged and commonly recognised amongst the children and the mentors. These groups are still gypsies, and the mentors predominantly are still gorgeous, which is the gypsy word for non-gypsies. Those identities are really important, but there is a recognition that there is a humanity which crosses over that border. They both look and recognise a common interest, and that common interest is not some kind of high-flying idea. It's just that both groups like Ariana Grande, and that bonds them together. There's also the idea of media and communities democracy, which is another problematic issue with any of these projects, because we look at community, and I suppose quite naively, as having a level of democracy inherently. But why should this be? Communities have power players, after all. A school may say it's a community, but there is a hierarchy involved in that. And that's another important factor in the project. I mean, editorial control is an important case. Traditionally, media, a group of people going into an organisation, a school, a gypsy community, will have editorial control over the artifact, and we are most careful that editorial control does not rest with the university, it does not rest with the mentors, it rests with the client themselves. We just teach them how to do it. They actually do it and have the control over the narrative. Now, that level of community, either in the camp, as we broadly call it, or the classroom, does not come from working on a teacher or curriculum defined topic. I've had a conversation today with some people involved in one of the clients who were saying, "Oh, we want the children to make our annual report," and I'm thinking they're going to be bored stiff doing that. They need to be making stuff about what they're interested in. In that sense, I suppose that's where Ariana Grande comes in. But one of the things is that even if you think a topic that the children are going to be making is quite worthy, so it might be something like classroom bullying, making a programme about classroom bullying is not the way in which this project aims to get that message across. It aims to get the message across by bringing children together in a group of recognised professionals. So the children will quickly grasp that within a team there is a presenter and a broadcast assistant and a producer and a researcher, lighting and script writers and those sorts of things, and they all share a level of common success. And this is also a great description of the impact on the mentors themselves. Now, students are used to working within these groups, so they quickly recognise the impact of having this is having on children, and that's another positive effect. They see children as having fun, and who doesn't like to see that in the classroom? But also those bonds being built, the mentor who recognises their part in this whole thing feels good about themselves, and that's a rather strange outcome for people who are trying to pin things down. The actual a mentor just feeling good about how they've operated the project. It's rather a strange philosophy, but something I think that we're probably all searching out in the end as teachers and mentors. So lots of sort of benefits potentially there. Now, the democratization of learning is a factor that we need to look at as far as student as producer is concerned. If we look at Neary commenting on that students should be as much more than consumers of education, but active in the academic project of university. Within media, we often see students as producers of artifact, but there is a deeper meaning with this project where students are actually reflecting on the journey that they've taken, the research and the academic journey, getting closer to Neary's definition. Now, this is in contrast to other collaborative arts projects that I've been involved in, such as Sound Dog in 2015, where students joined me to make a piece of sound art over a day, and that was then broadcast. The result of this was something that I really enjoyed. I absolutely adored this, but there was a lack of general engagement by students, and I can now reflect on that and think no wonder, because there was no real incentive for students to take part. The goals, the aims and objectives were poorly defined, I think, by me at the start of the project, and the narrative was controlled by me rather than students. Pownall would conclude, I feel, that we should have been looking at this as students as partners as much as students as producers. Students shouldn't be just involved in the practice and the analysis, but in the planning and the ethos as well, even before you get to the making stage. All questions, I think, to ponder as I go through this learning journey as myself. I think we can consider all of us as producers and students, don't we? All right, there's much formalization of research to be done. In other words, the analysis of previous mentor experiences, the collection of new ones and their analysis as well, and the collecting of narrative testimonials from different people. Now, amongst those testimonials I want to look at are ones which see the extrapolation of this Lincoln module to look at other community media projects. I was also interested in Tom's reflection on his Southern Sudan project and Rose Braisby's thoughts about the way in which the Rampton Knowledge Transfer Partnership ended. More of that in a second or two. So some of the potential impacts then, those on the screen are some of the ones that I have reflected upon so far, and it's perfectly possible that we'll find other impacts coming out as I start to analyze the data. I'm going to look at positives and negatives as well. It's a strange way around to put the slides, really, but we'll have a look at the negatives. There's two examples I want to show, and I will sort of say that even though I'm going to say that these are negatives, there's a lot of positivity within these issues that these projects came up with. The first one on the top right hand side, that's the Peaks unit at Rampton Hospital for patients with severe and dangerous personality disorder, and we ran a knowledge transfer partnership there, and there was a massive amount of effort and resources went into that project. It was a 3-year full-time intervention. It got full-time staff. There were endless reports written, equipment was bought, but in the end it all closed. It all closed down once the KTP finished. We feel because key staff within the organisation probably had no real interest or investment into making it work or carrying it on after that initial input had been put in, sort of an organisational inertia, really. The other one at the school, we've got down on the left-hand side there, it's not that school, I will hasten to add, where you have a head teacher who was enthusiastic, but a class teacher who wasn't, and this meant that there was no support for the mentors. The teacher would not pass on material, the children or parents would not receive information, the class was left alone, emails were not answered. From the mentor's point of view, it was a complete nightmare, didn't go to plan at all. And then we had Tom's experience in Southern Sudan as well, and I can remember well the look on his face and his parting words from his presentation about not knowing if anything still remained about the project. And I think with all these, looking at the analysis, listening to Tom's words, talking to Rose Braisby about the KTP, there's almost a level of sadness from the mentors. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't considerable positivity to take from the student mentors. They were praised for the tenacity, and that's one of the key things. You know, it's actually been able to push this project through to completion in the face of all these adverse conditions. There's significant proof that patients' lives were impacted with the KTP, their well-being improved, their stay at Rampton, their time at Rampton reduced without doubt. And Tom's presentation was inspirational. That was just a wonderful kind of project that I'm sure impacted, and there is proof from Tom that people were impacted by his intervention in southern Sudan. So the positives then, from the material I've collected so far, certainly see quite a lot of positives from a project like this that I hope to reinforce in the next stage. These are some of the comments that have been collected from student recollections. So one of the ones, and we do see quite a few students who are lacking in confidence, and this is not an easy project for them to do, but if they can push through that project with our help as university staff, giving them lessons in how to plan and talks from teachers in how to run projects like this, they can succeed, and their personal confidence is improved by being able to run a project in the wild. Mentors are encouraged to have their own aims and objectives self-written at the start of a project, and they can run through that and be helped to achieve that. Another factor is doing things which push your skills, push your organizational skills, push your practical skills. We'll have a look at those. The recognition from this student that planning and teamwork and hard work all could be used to overcome that lack of experience and lack of confidence. And then we have being able to manage and organize structure in a project is important. A mentor's ability to negotiate the whole project from the planning stage to the celebration stage at the end gives them the recognition that this success was under their watch. This was their success, no, not mine. Although I must admit, I do take pride in seeing them succeed as well. They equally take pride in seeing their project succeed and their children succeed. It requires tenacity, range of skills, but in the end, mentors can recognize that they have these skills and reflect upon them: tenacity, organization, negotiation. What we see in the picture there is university pre-COVID, with where children were brought into school. We've got parents there, we've got teachers, we've got the children, all for a special assembly. I think the vicar is there somewhere. Typically the vicar's always invited. The videos were played on the big screen. The head teacher stands up, thanks everybody. Children are called out, get their certificates. Who made this happen? It was the mentors, and you can bet they knew that this success was on their watch. They took delight in that success, but also in the look on the faces of the parents and the children. Now, why is this so important for the mentors' experience compared to a university-based project? Well, they have a group of children who are pretty well in their care, and they're going to run wild if the mentors drop the ball. There is no room for standing back during that 12 weeks and saying, I'm just going to take a break for this. The whole thing will collapse. They know that this is a really important live project, and the success of being able to hang on to that and continue that. And it's not just something that is submitted to Blackboard, but it has a real impact on children's lives, is not lost on these mentors at all. We've mentioned the idea of honing skills. The mentors report that their knowledge of their particular practice areas is improved by having to teach others how to do it, stripping back those skills that they learned at level 4, reflecting on those skills, thinking that they're actually going to have to produce lessons to show children how to operate this equipment, really has a significant impact on their own ability to take their practical skills forward. And again, the idea of teaching and learning, the idea of learning new skills and relearning the skills that you have by teaching others is reflected in student feedback. Employment prospects, the benefit of having something different to put on your CV, and this represents a practical example of organisation, group, time management, professionalism, tenacity. I keep coming back to that word. Working under pressure. All of this is not just in a university environment, but in the wild. And I know from conversations with past students who are some way down the road in their careers now, but they might have gone into media, they might have gone into different sort of areas, that having this to talk about within their interview and having this project to put on their CVs is certainly a positive point when they're coming to sit in front of an interview panel. It's often something that an interview panel will want to engage them in. But it also means, according to the conversations I've had with past students, that it means that they are remembered after the interview, rather than just another face and another CV and another interview. That's, oh yeah, I remember that person. They did that project and they were really enthusiastic about it. Career aspirations as well, and the students often start to go, I don't want to be a teacher. And I always pain to say, actually, this is about a different set of skills, a different set of impacts on you. It's not a course which is designed to get them all to become teachers, but it's one where it opens up a series of career avenues. Now, as mentioned, there are these hidden benefits outside of the learning outcomes that fit into the CVs and the ability to impress in an interview. And there are many graduates from the project who now work in education. On the left hand side, we've got Holly Wright and Rosewood Evans on the right hand side. You might recognise those names if you've been at university for quite a while. Now the thing is these two are teachers at Lincolnshire schools, which we are now partnered with on the project. And I didn't know that. That was a really nice surprise. You go into a school and you look up at the board and there's all these faces. I know that person. And these aren't the only ones. There's lots of examples of students who are now working in education, and they wouldn't have known about that side of their skill unless they'd have experienced the project. So another hidden benefit away from the learning outcome. Now, it does make me feel quite old, since these two up here are now into, this is their second career. Holly started in PR at the Ministry of Defence, and Rose worked, as it says there, she worked at QVC. Holly teaches year 5 at Metheringham, and Rose is a reception teacher at Reefham. And there are, or there may be, and I'm going to have to look at this, some potential for research into and quantitative analysis, looking at student destinations and comparing students who have gone through the module, where they have actually ended up in their careers, and students who haven't gone through the module, where they have ended up, and employment rates and the like. We also have reflective practice. Now, the importance of having a solid plan, a lesson plan each time, and then reflecting on that plan is not lost on the students. They quickly discover that this is absolutely vital if it's not all to go to pot. We often talk, don't we, about the need for reflection when we're making our media artifacts, and I think sometimes students see this as just, oh yeah, it's just an academic thing that we've got to go through. But this is a practical manifestation. They do a lesson, they reflect on the lesson, they build in the lessons of what went well and what didn't for the next one. And then we have this professionalism and pride, having a professional stance, getting there on time, turning up every time, being professionally dressed, being organised, being seen, and this is a sort of I don't know, pride in yourself, being seen by others as professionals, by the teachers, and being seen as by the teachers of being a teacher, a professional, and as by the children as being a media professional. If you see in the middle there, that's Mr. Kidger, a fellow teacher to the teachers and the radio professional to the children, raising awareness of their own personal worth. So just to sum up then, some conclusions. There's quite a lot of work to be done to get this formal research laid out and to make it more robust. I think the initial findings from former students and student mentors indicate that there are a range of benefits. And you might wonder what the purpose of the Bruce Willis Morgan Freeman picture. It's Armageddon versus deep impact. I'm hoping that the research is going to show that there is deep impact in the project rather than complete Armageddon. Though there are impacts, yeah, those impacts, some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but also I think that as we move on, fingers crossed, the positive impacts are going to outweigh the negative ones.